When I look back on my childhood, I wonder how I managed to survive at all. McCourt wrote, "It was, of course, a miserable childhood. The happy childhood is hardly worth your while. Worse than the ordinary miserable childhood is the miserable Irish childhood, and worse yet is the miserable Irish Catholic childhood." Frank McCourt, an American writer of international renown, New York, 1930, New York, 2009, was born from a Northern Irish father and an Irish mother, both of whom were devoted to Catholicism, which is the reason why the author makes it one of the main themes of the book, and why on several occasions it represents a crossroads that cannot be ignored. From his earliest years, the author, who writes about his own life, finds himself and his mother facing dramas that no one should ever have to put up with: the premature death of his sister, Margaret, a father who is addicted to drinking and who regularly drinks the subsidy, dragging the whole family into extreme poverty, and then the subsequent death of two other twin brothers due to the extreme conditions in which they lived. When Frank is only 11 years old, his father leaves his wife and three others surviving children in the remote Limerick, Ireland, a small town where classism and religious prejudice are prevalent, and the poorest, of course, suffer the most. Lack of food, money, and charcoal lead the whole family to have to move after a sudden eviction, and finding nowhere to live, they go to Angela's cousin, a crude and cruel man who abuses the woman in exchange for free support of his family. Thus Frank finds himself the man of the house, and only after recovering from various illnesses and understanding what those nighttime noises from his mother's room were, disgusting, he moved to his uncle's house. His brilliant mind had to leave school at only 13 to help the family. He found temporary jobs, and at the age of 19 returned to his beloved country, the United States, where finally managed to graduate. In 1958 he was awarded a prestigious scholarship that led him to teach English in two schools in the countries. Angelos Ashes received the Pulitzer Prize in 1997, and even earlier, in 1996, the National Book Critics Circle Award for the world's most loved novel. It was unavoidable that in 1999 the film of the same name, directed by Alan Parker, would appear. The two works reflect each other very much, and the film succeeds in an extremely dramatic and realistic way in representing the suffering conditions of families in those years. The film begins immediately by throwing us into the arms of dumb misery. The first shots show the alleys and the rainy sky, unlike the book, which from the very first pages tried to enter the reader's soul by explaining and analyzing the conditions of that time. The director must be acknowledged for his great work. Too often, and this is notable, he was challenged by the presence of the Irish Church, censoring and changing sentences. Despite the difficulty in filming such crude scenes, he still managed to convey the audience that feeling of identification and solidarity that makes a film unique. As frequently happens, many scenes, maybe too many in my opinion, have been kept out of the cinematographic representation, making it seem slimmer than it should be. It is a book that was created to enter the soul of each one of us, that lives indescribable sensations under the skin, and it's a pity to have to slim down a film of its most significant scenes. Despite the omissions, the film still manages to retain the book's significant power. The themes of religion, poverty, childhood, and hope resound strongly. The concept of education as the only way to salvation is highlighted, and the fact that Frank has become a teacher has its own redemption. What is told in is an autobiographical story of an happy Irish Catholic childhood, And as mentioned before, it is the worst thing that could happen to the McCart boys. Throughout the book, the author wants to underline with meticulous descriptions how difficult it was for him to survive in those times in the most difficult town in the country. The strength of a literary work, I think, is largely reflected in its ability to penetrate under the skin, to work its way throughout the cracks in the soul of each of us. Frank McCart, it's the nail on the head. He succeeds in his very original style in describing photographs of key moments in the various stages of his life and his family. A period of wars, England and Ireland, always in strong opposition and misery in the daily bread. Pride has no limits. For an Irishman to go and help the enemy land at that time meant dishonoring his own land, and rather, as in this case, he preferred to leave his family. Throughout the book, the predominant force is the theme of religion. It is precisely on this that the author wants to base his story. The intention is to describe how a religion that sometimes presents itself in an obsessive and compulsory way leads to an inevitable world of inept people. And here the writer brings in another recurring theme, ignorance, an ignorance that leads the family and the whole poor world of Limerick to live in the most hidden fantasies. The children become boys, and here the way they want to know. They want to understand how their little brothers are born. They want to understand what those noises are that Frank hears in his mother's room. No answer. No one has ever bothered to explain because it is considered a Christian crime what love is. Maybe because no one has ever considered it love but only sex. In this, as in so many other matters that have touched me personally, I feel duty bound and free to express my thoughts on the matter. Needless to point out the class world in which they lived. Laughter, contempt, that's what the rich had in store for them when they saw the conditions in which the poor were reduced to living. If possible, no help was given. On the contrary, the door was often not even opened. It makes you reflect on how paradoxical a country is, but which could be compared to many current realities, which pretend so much about a Catholic state in which your neighbor comes before you and where God punishes you for every act considered impure, that he gets lost in a glass of water. The woman, the main character in the book and beyond the wolf community, the mother woman dedicated to the family, without which it would not go on, without which they would not be future. Woman seen in many cases as an object typical of that period, a woman seen as an object of man's venting, useful to make children. It's amazing how well all these issues treated one by one and with all their aspect can be transferred to an ordinary society of our time, and this is certainly not encouraging. No reason other than advice led me to choose this book. It's an international fame, and being one of the most widely read novels in the world made me want to read it more. It transmits you, but above all, manages to leave a mark. At the beginning, it's a book that, due to its weight of writing, long periods without pauses or commas, is difficult to read, and very often you don't understand references that are obvious to him. The writer knows that whenever he takes you to reread fragments of chapters, you are be able to read between the lines, things that you had not previously understood, and if this can be annoying and even boring at first, it is a technique that you will love in the course of the book.